America has a funny way of celebrating Black queer icons, usually after they're gone. While alive, they were too much, too loud, too radical, too real. But once buried, suddenly legendary. This isn't your average tribute, it's a glitter-covered reality check for those who only remember us when it's profitable. These 15 Black LGBTQ+ legends didn't die quietly, and we're not honoring them quietly either. If you've ever vogued in a mirror, you're dancing in his footsteps. Willie turned movement into protest. Every dip, duck walk, and hand flourish was a declaration. I exist. I matter. In the 1980s, when Black and brown queer kids were being shoved to the margins, Willie carved out runways in Harlem ballrooms where they could reign as royalty. He brought that fierce artistry to Paris. To Paris is Burning, to the mainstream. And then came Madonna. Vogue went viral. But Willie, he got a round of applause and a fast fade-out. The fashion world took his brilliance, repackaged it in white bodies, and left him out of the credits. He died of AIDS-related illness at 45. No tribute show, no luxury brand capsule collection, just silence, and a few TikTok kids who think they invented duck walking last week. Society's legacy. Who? Exactly. First Black American admitted to the Paris fashion elite. He blended camp with critique, buttons, dolls, and watermelon references used to skewer racism. But he died of AIDS before he could build a lasting empire. No retrospectives, no Gucci collab, just silence and sequins. Society's legacy. Steals his style, leaves his name behind. The falsetto legend who sang with the soul of 1,000 disco balls. Before RuPaul, before Lil Nas X, there was Sylvester. A gospel-trained, gender-defying, sequin-soaked Black queen with a voice that could split the sky. He brought disco to church and church to disco. His music didn't just move bodies, it moved barriers. But when AIDS began its merciless sweep, Sylvester watched his friends die, one by one. He used his fame to fight, to speak out, to demand that America stop pretending not to notice. And for his courage, he got ignored. He died in 1988, no mainstream tributes, no Grammy, just silence. Now every Pride, you'll hear You Make Me Feel Mighty Real blasting from rainbow floats. The song's immortal. His name, barely a whisper. Legacy, reduced to a bop without a backstory. The Queen Mother of Ballroom, with wisdom sharp enough to cut lace. Yes, the headlines remember the body in the closet. But what they forget, what they choose to forget, is the years she spent as a seamstress of souls. Dorian wasn't just a drag legend. She was a protector, a teacher, a mother to lost kids who had been kicked out, pushed aside, erased. She showed them how to walk, how to shine, how to survive. Her closet may have held a dark secret, but her legacy held light. And instead of honoring her with a documentary or a Lifetime Achievement Award, they gave her a footnote in a true crime series. She didn't get her roses, she got reduced to a clickbait headline. Society's legacy, remembered for a corpse, forgotten for a community. Flamboyant, electric, radio gold until they cut the cord. He told us you didn't have to take your clothes off to have a good time, and he meant it. Jermaine brought joy, rhythm, and sparkly jackets to the 80s, crafting hits that lit up the charts and dance floors alike. He had the charisma of Prince and the charm of a pop star in bloom. But when whispers about his sexuality and health status began, the airwaves dried up. Interviews stopped. Invitations vanished. He became invisible while he was still alive. He died in 1997, mostly alone, at just 39 years old. No tribute concerts, no posthumous album release, just people at karaoke bars going, "Oh my God, I love this song. Wait, who sang it again?" Society's legacy. Remembers the hook, forgets the human. A trans goddess who didn't just walk the runway, she floated. Octavia wasn't just beautiful, she was incandescent. Her dream? To be a fashion model in a world that thought trans meant disqualified. In Paris is Burning, she spoke of dignity like it was her birthright. And it was. She dared to want what was denied to people like her. Visibility, respect, a magazine cover that didn't treat her like a token. But Vogue never called. Calvin Klein never came. The same industry that profits off trans aesthetics today left Octavia out in the cold. She died of cancer at 45, cherished by the ballroom scene, mourned by underground icons, ignored by the institutions she longed to crack open. Society's response, so inspiring. Then, absolutely nothing. No campaigns, no covers, no legacy, just faint applause and a forgotten name. A Black gay man who became a best-selling author in a world that barely wanted to shelve his books. He wrote about Black men who loved men, sometimes in secret, sometimes with joy, always with complexity. His novels weren't just stories, they were mirrors for the unseen. He built an audience from scratch, one page at a time, in barbershops, book clubs, and word-of-mouth circles. He proved that there was a market for these stories, if the gatekeepers would just move aside. But instead of celebrating him, the publishing world said, "Urban lit." Translation: thanks, but no mainstream respect, no Pulitzer, no HBO miniseries, no Oprah sticker, just a shrug and a dusty shelf in the African American interest section. He died at 54, no fanfare, no headline. Legacy? Didn't he write something my aunt used to read? A visionary choreographer who brought Black America to center stage, while being forced to hide his whole truth. Alvin's dances were sermons. Bodies bending, twisting, reaching toward freedom. He gave us Revelations, a masterpiece of movement that honored Black faith, sorrow, and survival. He founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater so dancers of color could take up space with beauty and power. But behind the curtains, Alvin lived a double life. He couldn't be openly gay. Not if he wanted white donors. Not if he wanted to keep the lights on. Even when AIDS came for him, he asked for the cause of death to be listed as something else. He gave the world art. It gave him erasure. Society's legacy celebrates the choreographer, erases the man. The mother of the house, the architect of chosen family, a light extinguished too soon. Angie didn't just walk balls, she built them. When kids were thrown out of their homes for being queer or trans, she took them in. She stitched their gowns, held their hands, told them they were beautiful when the world called them trash. She ran a house like it was a sacred refuge. But the world she helped protect them from eventually took her too. AIDS doesn't care how loving you are. And after Angie died, the same system she'd been shielding her children from kept swallowing more of them whole. Society's legacy, Vogue's on TV shows, drops her house's name on Instagram bios, but forgets the labor, the care, the cost. Angie gave them family, they gave her footnotes. Assaulted in front of the world, murdered a month later, no one is held accountable. When a viral video showed Malaysia being beaten in a Dallas parking lot, the internet cried out. News anchors feigned outrage, politicians tweeted platitudes, but justice, protection, change, nowhere to be found. 30 days later, she was shot and killed, just 22 years old. Her death wasn't just tragic, it was predictable. The warning signs were on video, and still, nothing. Her story faded the moment the hashtag stopped trending. Society's response: add her name to the list. Light a candle, say RIP, then forget. Legacy, trauma porn with no follow-up. Black, trans, killed by police, discarded by the movement he should have belonged to. Tony didn't die in the 1980s. He didn't die in silence. He died in 2020, during the so-called racial reckoning. He was shot by police in Florida, and somehow, his death didn't fit anyone's script. He was trans and masculine presenting. He had a record. He was complex, and that complexity made him inconvenient. So while Say Their Names echoed across streets and screens, Tony's name barely passed a whisper. Because he wasn't perfect, because he challenged the neat narratives people like to chant. Society's legacy. Fought for justice, but only for the photogenic. Tony became a footnote in a footnote. Black, queer, armed, unafraid, and punished for all of it. Corin dared to defy the script. She live-streamed a standoff with Baltimore police. She refused to be silent. She refused to comply. And for that, they shot her in her apartment and shot her son too, 5 years old, wounded in front of his mother's body. But she wasn't the right kind of victim. She had a gun. She talked back. She didn't smile for the cameras or beg for sympathy, so the world moved on. No murals, no marches. No Netflix docuseries. Society's response: she should have known better. Legacy buried under respectability politics. No pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. Marcia wasn't just at Stonewall, she was Stonewall. She threw bricks, opened shelters, served meals, and kissed foreheads. She did drag not for show, but for survival. She walked the streets of New York like a patron saint of the forgotten, crowned with flowers and cloaked in resistance. She fought for Black trans kids before the acronym had a T in it. And then in 1992, she turned up dead in the Hudson River. The NYPD labeled it a suicide faster than you could say bias, and they investigated it with the enthusiasm of someone looking for a lost sock. For years, her death was treated like a shrug. Society's response? Paint a mural, name a crosswalk, toss out Marsha P. Johnson once every June like a magic spell that makes people feel woke. Cool. Thanks. She deserved justice, not hashtags. Poet, activist, truth teller. Too Black, too gay, too unflinching for your curriculum. Essex didn't write poems, he lit fuses. He told America that being a Black gay man wasn't about rainbows and parades, it was about surviving silence, dodging violence, and trying to find joy anyway. He wrote about desire, rage, HIV, and hope in the same breath. Publishers didn't know what to do with him. Too political, too queer, too everything. He was anthologized in whispers, taught in no schools, and loved fiercely by the ones who saw themselves in his fire. He died in 1995, just before the digital age could carry his voice to the world he wrote for. Legacy, quoted in protest signs by people who've never cracked a spine of his books. He warned us. We blinked. He didn't want fame, he wanted freedom. For Black gay men to exist without apology. In the 1980s, Joseph looked around and saw that no one was writing about men like him, so he became the voice. He edited In the Life, the first anthology of Black gay men's writing, crafting a space where the words Black, gay, and human could sit together without shame. He had plans, big ones, but AIDS took him before the second volume could be finished. The silence he left behind was painful, gaping, and felt like a betrayal by a world too busy to care. His death wasn't just personal, it was generational. One less beacon, one less book, one more void. Society's response: slap a rainbow on a bank logo and say love is love, but only if it's palatable, only if it sells. In a landscape of polished personas and curated perfection, Gun Athaphon stands out for his emotional honesty. Known for his unforgettable performances in Thai BL dramas, Gun broke barriers when he publicly came out as gay, something few male stars in the region have dared to do. What sets Gun apart is his willingness to be vulnerable, both on-screen and off. He portrays queer characters not as caricatures, but as real people. Complex, messy, tender. He leans into heartbreak, joy, and longing with such rawness that audiences can't help but see themselves reflected in him. Gun doesn't seek attention, he seeks truth. And in doing so, he has become an icon for LGBTQ+ youth who crave representation that doesn't flinch or filter. For them, Gun is more than a heartthrob, he's a lifeline. Chris Parawat has never publicly labeled his sexuality, and he doesn't have to. What matters is the respect, care, and thoughtfulness he brings to every LGBTQ+ role he plays. In the world of BL dramas, Chris has become a household name, and his performances are marked by dignity and sincerity. He once said, "Love is love, and it deserves to be portrayed with dignity." That attitude defines his career. He's not in it for trendiness or superficial fame. He's in it to tell real stories. And that integrity has earned him a deeply loyal LGBTQ+ fan base who appreciate not just the characters he plays, but the person he is. Chris is a reminder that you don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to act with heart. New Thitapum represents the new wave of Thai stars who are reshaping the entertainment landscape, not through controversy, but through compassion. His work in BL dramas is marked by a quiet brilliance, an ability to portray queer love stories with warmth, depth, and humanity. But it's what he does off-screen that sets him apart. In interviews and fan events, New often speaks out about LGBTQ+ acceptance, using his influence to foster empathy and understanding. He listens, he learns, and he uplifts. To many fans, especially queer ones, New offers something invaluable: hope. Hope that love doesn't have to be hidden, hope that allies can be trusted, hope that the future of Thai media is brighter and more inclusive than ever. Mew Supasit isn't just an actor, he's a one-man movement. Starting as a beloved BL star, he quickly evolved into a powerhouse producer and advocate, determined to shift how LGBTQ+ stories are told in Thai entertainment. Tired of the same recycled tropes, tragic endings, stereotypes, shame, Mew decided to take control of the narrative. He began producing content that celebrates queer love as something joyful, transformative, and real. His projects emphasize emotional depth, mental health, and the beauty of everyday connection. Globally, Mew has amassed a passionate fan base, especially among LGBTQ+ youth who see in him a kind of healing. He shows them that queer stories don't have to end in pain, and that representation, when done right, can change lives. Mew isn't just making content, he's making space for love, for truth, for everyone. Phloop Natuch is more than an actor, he's a storyteller of the soul. Openly gay and unafraid to be vulnerable, Phloop has carved a space for himself in Thai entertainment by channeling deep, often unspoken emotions into his performances. His characters frequently grapple with loneliness, hidden love, and the desperate desire to be seen for who they truly are. But what makes Phloop's work resonate so powerfully is that it doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like lived truth. He brings an aching sincerity to every role, reminding viewers, especially queer youth, that they are not alone in their struggles. Off-screen, Phloop continues to be a gentle but unwavering advocate, reminding fans that authenticity is an act of courage, and that pain, when transformed into art, can heal not just the artist, but everyone watching. Kaprao Pongkul doesn't just sing, he bears his heart in every lyric. As an openly gay singer-songwriter, he has used his music to illuminate the quiet corners of queer experience. The ache of unspoken affection, the sting of isolation, the sweetness of forbidden love. His decision to come out on national television was bold, but it was also beautifully human. He stood in his truth, not for attention, but for liberation. And since that day, he's never looked back. Kaprao's songs have become soundtracks for those who thought no one understood them. For the closeted teen listening through headphones in the dark, or the heartbroken adult longing for acceptance, his voice carries something rare: validation. In a world that still silences too many queer stories, Kaprao chooses to sing them out loud. In an industry often dominated by flash and spectacle, Boom Kritapak stands out for his quiet authenticity. Known for his soft-spoken charm and genuine humility, Boom has become a beloved figure in the Thai BL universe, not only for his acting, but for the way he carries himself with kindness. Though he doesn't speak loudly, Boom has long been a vocal supporter of the LGBTQ+ community, making sure that the queer love stories he helps bring to life are portrayed with nuance, respect, and empathy. His belief that love is love and it deserves dignity comes through in every character he plays. To many fans, especially LGBTQ+ youth, Boom represents a kind of gentle strength, the kind that doesn't shout but stands firm. His presence, both on and off screen, is a quiet revolution. Best Vidawin is part of a growing wave of Thai actors who approach LGBTQ+ roles with intentionality and heart. Thoughtful and emotionally attuned, Best brings a remarkable depth to his characters, often portraying young men navigating identity, love, and belonging. In interviews, Best has expressed his belief that portraying queer characters isn't about performance. It's about understanding. "You don't have to be gay to understand a gay character," he once said. "You just have to care." That empathy shines through in his work. Every glance, every pause, every tear feels real because it's rooted in compassion. Best is showing audiences that great acting isn't just about talent, it's about heart, and his heart is very much in the right place. Young, bold, and refreshingly open-hearted, Szymon Wachirowicz is a Gen Z star who's helping change the face of Thai media. He's part of a generation that doesn't see queerness as controversial, but as something beautiful, human, and worth celebrating. While Szymon hasn't publicly defined his sexuality, his allyship is loud and clear. Through his BL roles, his social media presence, and his interactions with fans, he consistently promotes acceptance, kindness, and self-expression. He's not afraid to challenge outdated ideas of masculinity, showing his millions of followers that true strength lies in empathy. Whether he's dancing in a crop top or comforting a fan in tears, Szymon reminds us that being real is far cooler than being tough. To the queer youth watching him, Szymon is more than a rising star. He's a friend in the spotlight who sees them, supports them, and believes in a future where no one has to hide. Mukwaranit might be best known for her soft-spoken, sweet girl roles in romantic dramas, but behind the gentle smile is a bold, empathetic heart. As a rising actress and singer in Thailand's BL, boys love entertainment scene, Muk has become one of the industry's most beloved LGBTQ+ allies. But unlike others who treat queer visibility as trendy branding, Muk's allyship feels personal and real. She's consistently used her voice to promote acceptance, equality, and respect. Her social media feeds are often sprinkled with support for LGBTQ+ friends, castmates, and causes. And when fans thank her for understanding love without conditions, she simply replies, "It's not understanding, it's just human." In a country still wrestling with traditional values and slow-moving legislation, Muk represents the next generation. Inclusive, fearless, and deeply compassionate. To call Jenny Panhan a comedian is to only tell half the story. She's a trans woman, a talk show host, a scene-stealing actress, and perhaps most importantly, a fearless truth-teller disguised as a jokester. Jenny has used humor as her weapon of choice, skewering gender roles, mocking bigotry, and unmasking hypocrisy, all with a wink and a punchline. Whether she's hosting on TV or poking fun at societal norms, Jenny brings not only laughs, but emotional resonance. Her jokes cut deep because they're laced with lived experience. But behind the glitter and giggles is someone who's had to fight to be taken seriously. "People think laughter makes us weak," she once said. "But I've survived more with humor than most could with anger." That's her gift. She makes people laugh, but she also makes them think. And maybe even change. Yoshi Rinrada is more than just a trans beauty queen. She's a symbol of quiet revolution. With her ethereal beauty, serene voice, and calming presence, Yoshi has captivated audiences across Asia. But beneath the soft-spoken elegance lies a fierce advocate who uses every photo shoot, interview, and public appearance to spotlight the struggles of her community. As a transgender woman, Yoshi has spoken candidly about facing bullying, discrimination, and mental health challenges. Yet she's never allowed bitterness to harden her. Instead, she meets ignorance with grace and cruelty with kindness. "Kindness is strength," she once wrote in a social media post that went viral, and those words have become a mantra for many. Yoshi is proof that activism doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes a whisper of dignity can be just as powerful as a roar. Belwarisarayu made headlines in Thailand not because she came out, but because of how she did it. At a time when few Thai female celebrities dared to speak openly about their sexuality, Belle chose radical honesty. She didn't frame her identity as a confession or controversy. She framed it as love. Her story was raw, emotional, and hopeful. She spoke of the isolation she once felt, the fear of rejection, and the overwhelming relief of finally being able to live as her true self. For many young lesbians in Thailand, especially those without role models, Belle became a voice that echoed their own unspoken feelings. Today, Belle is a vibrant social media personality and outspoken queer advocate. Her content doesn't just entertain, it uplifts. She reminds followers that visibility is power, and that authenticity is a form of activism. Unmistakable isn't just a respected name in the Thai music scene, he's a symbol of quiet courage and unwavering authenticity. A seasoned singer and music producer, To shocked fans and colleagues when he publicly came out and shared that he had been in a loving relationship with his longtime boyfriend. But what truly made the moment unforgettable wasn't the reveal itself. It was the serenity and dignity with which he spoke about love. No drama, no apology, just truth, calmly spoken. His words touched a deep nerve in Thailand's LGBTQ+ community, especially among those who'd spent years feeling invisible. "Love doesn't need to be hidden to be real," he said in an interview. That single sentence became a beacon for many queer Thais who had long internalized shame. By simply standing in his truth, To helped others believe that their love, too, deserved to be seen, celebrated, and respected. Few Thai celebrities command the kind of admiration and international attention that Trichata Poid Pecharat does. Crowned Miss International Queen in 2004, Poid is often described as one of the most beautiful women in Asia. But her true radiance goes far beyond appearance. A proud transgender woman, Poid has used her platform to reshape conversations around femininity, dignity, and self-acceptance. Her journey, from gender dysphoria as a child to global fame, is one of grace forged through struggle. "We don't get to choose the body we're born in," she once said, "but we can choose to live honestly." And that's exactly what she's done. Every role she's taken, every interview she's given, and every step she's walked has been rooted in truth. Today, she's not only an actress and model, but also a cultural ambassador, showing the world that transgender identity is not a limitation, but a form of power, beauty, and authenticity. In the golden glow of classic Hollywood, there were stars. And then there was James Cagney. With his trademark snarl, lightning-fast delivery, and eyes that danced with danger, he didn't just play gangsters, he became them. The man who made audiences shiver in The Public Enemy, 1931, also tap-danced across hearts in Yankee Doodle Dandy, 1942. He was an artist of range and rare depth. But while the world saw a man on fire, what they didn't see, what they weren't allowed to see, may have been his truest role of all. A man who lived with dignity, grace, and secrets so deeply guarded that not even time has fully unearthed them. Nearly 4 decades after his passing, James Cagney remains both an icon and a mystery. He shattered stereotypes, challenged studios, and walked away from fame on his own terms. And perhaps in his most private hours, he walked a path few could understand, a path that might have included love that dared not speak its name. Born on July 17, 1899, in a tenement on New York's Lower East Side, Cagney knew hardship from the start. His mother, Carolyn Nelson Cagney, was the family's backbone, raising 7 children while her husband battled alcoholism. James, the second oldest, watched his family endure poverty with dignity. He once said his greatest influences were hunger and my mother. He worked as a bellhop, a copy boy, and even a night porter. But it was in vaudeville where his natural charisma exploded. First a dancer, then a comedian, and eventually a stage actor, Cagney's gritty authenticity and crackling energy caught the attention of Warner Bros. When he was cast in The Public Enemy, the industry changed overnight. Audiences had never seen anything like him. Though he was typecast as a gangster, Cagney never liked playing criminals. "I never liked the movies that made crime look glamorous," he once confessed. And yet, through roles like Tom Powers in The Public Enemy and Cody Jarrett in White Heat, 1949, he gave audiences unforgettable anti-heroes. His performances were electric, terrifying, and human. But Cagney was more than an actor, he was a rebel. In 1936, frustrated by low pay and studio control, he sued Warner Bros. For breach of contract and won, one of the first actors to ever do so. It was a seismic moment in the history of performers' rights. Kanye didn't want power for its own sake, he wanted fairness, creative control, and freedom. These themes would carry into the rest of his life. On and off screen, he also became an early member of the Screen Actors Guild, advocating for better treatment of actors at a time when studios held absolute power. In an industry where silence was often the cost of survival, Kanye was unafraid to speak out, but only when it came to labor. On matters of the heart, he was profoundly silent. In 1922, Kanye married Frances Willard "Billy" Vernon, a chorus girl he met during a Broadway revue. They remained married for over 60 years, a remarkable feat in Hollywood, where marriages often shattered like glass. Publicly, theirs was a model marriage, discreet, scandal-free, and enduring. But behind closed doors, the dynamic was far more ambiguous. The couple adopted 2 children, James Jr. and Kathleen, and kept their home life meticulously private. Billy was intensely shy, rarely seen in public, and largely absent from the social swirl of Hollywood. Biographers have long debated whether the Kanye-Vernon marriage was one of romantic love, deep companionship, or carefully arranged appearances. Given the era, it's not unthinkable that the union provided a socially acceptable shield for a man who may have lived a more complex truth. Kanye never addressed the whispers. He never had to. He was always one step ahead of Hollywood's curiosity and its cruelty. In 1922, Kanye married Frances Willard "Billy" Vernon, a chorus girl he met during a Broadway revue. They remained married for over 60 years, a remarkable feat in Hollywood, where marriages often shattered like glass. Publicly, theirs was a model marriage, discreet, scandal-free, and enduring. But behind closed doors, the dynamic was far more ambiguous. The couple adopted 2 children, James Jr. and Kathleen, and kept their home life meticulously private. Billy was intensely shy, rarely seen in public, and largely absent from the social swirl of Hollywood. Biographers have long debated whether the Kanye-Vernon marriage was one of romantic love, deep companionship, or carefully arranged appearances. Given the era, it's not unthinkable that the union provided a socially acceptable shield for a man who may have lived a more complex truth. Kanye never addressed the whispers. He never had to. He was always one step ahead of Hollywood's curiosity and its cruelty. James Kanye and Humphrey Bogart shared more than a studio lot. They shared a sensibility, a generation, a subtle defiance, and, if rumors are to be believed, perhaps even something deeper. The two were paired repeatedly by Warner Bros. In the 1930s and 40s, most famously in Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938. While Bogart often played the darker foil to Cagney's magnetic anti-hero, off-screen their bond was unusually strong. They were known to spend long weekends together at remote hideaways, fishing, or simply escaping the limelight. Friends called their connection deep and easy, noting that Bogart often lit up in Kany's presence. There are no love letters, no photographs to prove anything beyond friendship. But in an industry notorious for forced marriages and lavender arrangements, their closeness has inspired decades of speculation, particularly among historians of queer Hollywood. Kanye, ever reserved, dismissed all personal inquiry. Bogart, equally private, gave nothing away. Still, the silences are telling. By the 1950s, Kanye had tired of Hollywood. He withdrew to Verney Farm, his 120-acre retreat in Dutchess County, New York, where he raised horses, painted, and wrote poetry. He didn't need the spotlight anymore, if he ever did. When he returned briefly to the screen in Ragtime, 1981, he did so only for a friend. It was a quiet, dignified farewell. Cagney passed away on March 30, 1986, from complications related to diabetes and heart disease. He was 86. Billy was at his side. The public mourned, presidents praised him, fellow actors wept, but even in death he gave away little of himself. There was no dramatic confession, no memoir filled with revelations. just the steady silence of a man who had mastered control over his image and his truth. Was James Cagney gay? Was he bisexual? Or was he simply a man so private that the idea of sharing anything personal, even love, was unthinkable? We may never know. But the fact that these questions remain relevant in 2025 speaks to the hunger for truth and representation. In a time when queer stories were buried, lives like Cagney's became coded legends. He wasn't just a star, he was a symbol of masculinity, integrity, restraint, and perhaps quiet heartbreak. To speculate is not to accuse. It is to re-examine history with empathy. To wonder what it meant to be a sensitive, intelligent, fiercely independent man in an industry that rewarded conformity and punished authenticity. Cagney didn't need to come out to be brave. In the roles he chose, the power he wielded against studios, and the life he built away from Hollywood's demands, he revealed his courage every day. If he did love men, if he did love Bogart, he carried that love quietly, respectfully, without shame. And that, too, is a kind of heroism. In 2025, the legacy of James Cagney feels more vital than ever. He's remembered as one of the greatest actors who ever lived, but he's also becoming a symbol of the emotional costs of secrecy and the strength it took to survive within those constraints. To queer film lovers, Cagney is more than a legend. He's a flickering light from a time when truth was too dangerous to name. To others, he remains a singular talent, a tough guy with the soul of a poet. Perhaps he was both. Either way, James Cagney's story still burns bright. A life lived fiercely, a heart held close, and a legacy that even now keeps us wondering, dreaming, and looking for truth behind the curtain. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Whether you stayed for a few seconds, watched all the way through, dropped a like, or left a kind comment, you made a difference, and I felt it. In the sprawling, sun-scorched landscape of the cinematic West, where heroes were defined by their white hats and villains by their black ones, one man emerged who blurred all the lines. He was a force of nature, with eyes like polished steel and a face carved from granite. He was Lee Van Cleef. More than just an actor, he was an icon who embodied a new kind of menace. Intelligent, sophisticated, and utterly lethal. His story is not just one of a Hollywood heavy. It's a saga of grit, a spectacular rise from obscurity, and the forging of an immortal legacy as the ultimate movie villain. Clarence Leroy Van Cleef Jr. was born on January 9, 1925, in the quiet town of Somerville, New Jersey. The son of a watchmaker of Dutch ancestry, he learned the values of precision and discipline at an early age. But the quiet life wasn't destined to last. As America was drawn into World War II, a 17-year-old Van Cleef answered the call, enlisting in the U.S. Navy. This wasn't a peaceful tour of duty. Van Cleef was trained as a sonarman, a critical role aboard submarine chasers and minesweepers. He served in the treacherous waters of the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and the Black Sea, hunting for enemy U-boats and clearing naval mines. These were high-stakes, life-or-death operations. The intense, real-world experience of living on the edge forged in him a preternatural calm and a hardened demeanor. It was here, in the crucible of war, that the unflinching, steely gaze that would later define his career was born. Returning from the war, Van Cleef initially pursued a career in accounting, but the stage called to him. After a few amateur productions, he set his sights on Hollywood. With his tall, lean frame, razor-sharp cheekbones, and those piercing eyes, he was typecast almost immediately. He was born to play the bad guy. His big-screen debut came in the 1952 masterpiece High Noon, where he played Jack Colby, one of the silent, menacing henchmen waiting for the train. Though he had no lines, his presence was unforgettable. For the next decade, Van Cleef became a reliable character actor, the go-to guy for any director needing a ruthless gunslinger, a cold-blooded outlaw, or a two-bit hood. He appeared in countless westerns and crime dramas, often uncredited, usually destined to be gunned down by the film's hero. But just as he was carving out a niche for himself, disaster struck. In 1959, a horrific car crash left him with a shattered knee. Doctors told him he might never ride a horse again. A death sentence for a Western actor. Facing a bleak future, Van Cleef stepped away from the cameras, opening an interior decorating business to make ends meet. For nearly 5 years, the man with the unforgettable face was all but forgotten by the industry he had worked so hard to break into. He was a relic of a bygone era, his career seemingly over. Overnight, Lee Van Cleef became a superstar. Not in Hollywood, but across the Atlantic. Practically reborn in Europe, he found a new home and a whole new audience who saw him not as a typecast villain, but as a leading man worthy of center stage. After his electrifying performances in Sergio Leone's films, Italian directors began lining up to cast him in starring roles. Van Cleef decided to stay in Italy, and in doing so, he became the undisputed king of the spaghetti western genre. No longer relegated to the shadows or playing second fiddle to bigger stars, he now stood tall in the spotlight. He headlined a string of unforgettable westerns that are now considered classics: The Big Gun Down, 1966, Day of Anger, 1967, and Death Rides a Horse, 1967, among others. These films showcased his range, not just as a stoic gunfighter but as a complex character actor. He frequently portrayed anti-heroes, aging bounty hunters, grizzled lawmen, and lone wolves who lived by their own code. These were men hardened by time and tragedy, with faces carved by experience and eyes that had seen too much. Van Cleef brought authenticity, depth, and gravitas to each role. He wasn't just playing characters, he embodied them. Audiences were mesmerized. He had the rare ability to command the screen with minimal dialogue, letting a tilt of the head or a piercing glance do the talking. He proved that he was far more than the menacing side characters of his early career. Now, with his name at the top of the marquee, he became a guarantee of action, intensity, and unforgettable storytelling. A Lee Van Cleef movie poster meant you were in for something gritty, stylish, and electrifying. As the sun set on the golden age of the spaghetti westerns in the late 1970s, many of Van Cleef's contemporaries faded into obscurity. But not him. In true gunslinger fashion, he didn't ride off quietly. He adapted. He returned to American screens, this time embracing the emerging action and science fiction genres of the 1980s with the same conviction he brought to westerns. His weathered features, piercing eyes, and gravelly voice were tailor-made for playing figures of authority, especially those with a streak of danger. One of his most iconic roles during this period was as the tough and calculating police commissioner Bob Hawke in John Carpenter's Escape from New York, 1981, where he went toe-to-toe with Kurt Russell's rebellious Snake Plissken. Van Cleef's Hawke was equal parts commanding and enigmatic, a man who understood the chaos around him because he'd been through worse. He also faced off against Chuck Norris in The Octagon, 1980, portraying a mysterious martial arts master. Then, in a surprising yet fitting turn, he took on the lead in the television series The Master, 1984, playing a retired American ninja called back into action. It was an unusual role, equal parts camp and gravitas, but Van Cleef threw himself into it with characteristic charm and intensity, winning over a new generation of fans who had never seen his spaghetti western glory days. This late career renaissance showed that he wasn't just a western icon. He was a truly versatile performer who could hold his own in any genre. Behind the steely eyes and screen bravado was a man who had known both hardship and redemption. Van Cleef's personal life was marked by turbulence, 3 marriages, health struggles that traced back to a devastating car accident in the 1950s, and a famously rugged persona that hid a sensitive soul. One oft-repeated piece of trivia reveals a more human side of the legend. He lost the tip of his right middle finger while building a playhouse for his daughter. Rather than hiding the injury, he embraced it. It became a part of his mythos, another imperfection that made him real, and somehow even more formidable. He was a devoted father, a lover of painting and sailing, and a man who maintained his integrity through the highs and lows of a volatile industry. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. There was no artifice, just raw, unfiltered presence. On December 16, 1989, Lee Van Cleef passed away from a heart attack at the age of 64. The curtain fell on a remarkable life and a trailblazing career. Yet his legacy continues to blaze across the cinematic landscape like a sunset over the desert. He didn't just redefine the Western villain, he elevated him. He showed that evil could be nuanced, intelligent, even sympathetic. He turned the traditional black-hatted outlaw into a character worth rooting for, or at least understanding. There are stars whose presence explodes across the screen, loud, flamboyant, unforgettable. And then there are stars like Lee Remick, luminous, magnetic, and quietly soul-stirring. She didn't need to shout to command attention. Her artistry spoke in silences, in glances, in subtle gestures that revealed oceans of feeling beneath the surface. More than 30 years since her passing, her legacy still haunts the hearts of those who believe that true beauty lies in restraint, and that true strength often hides behind the softest of voices. Born on December 14, 1935, in Quincy, Massachusetts, Lee Ann Remick was raised in a home where creativity was deeply rooted. Her mother, Gertrude Margaret Waldo, had once been an actress, and though she stepped away from the stage, she encouraged her daughter's early leanings toward performance. Lee grew up in an atmosphere of cultivated elegance. Her early training in dance at the Swoboda School and later studies at the prestigious Barnard College gave her the poise and discipline that would mark her screen presence for decades to come. She wasn't just born into privilege, she was born into purpose. From a young age, Lee showed an instinctive ability to tap into emotion, not in an exaggerated way, but with an honesty that was almost disarming. Lee's screen debut in A Face in the Crowd, 1957, introduced her as a fresh, naturalistic performer. But it wasn't until Anatomy of a Murder, 1959, that the world truly recognized her gift. As Laura Mannion, the young wife at the heart of a rape and murder case, she delivered a performance filled with complexity, simultaneously coquettish and haunted, confident and deeply insecure. Critics saw in her a kind of duality, an ability to be both ethereal and earthy. She wasn't trying to dominate the screen, she simply belonged there. And then came a role that would forever change her career. In 1962, Remick starred opposite Jack Lemmon in Days of Wine and Roses, a devastating portrayal of a couple destroyed by alcoholism. Her performance as Kirsten Arneson Clay, innocent at first, then painfully lost, was nothing short of extraordinary. It was more than acting. It was transformation. The descent into addiction, the desperation, the love that couldn't save her, all of it was etched into Remick's soulful eyes. She was nominated for an Academy Award, but more importantly, she gave the world a lasting portrayal of the human cost of dependence. No melodrama, no spectacle, just truth. Jack Lemmon later said in interviews that working with Remick changed him forever. "She could break your heart without even speaking," he recalled. In an industry often obsessed with image, Lee Remick stood for substance. She possessed a kind of still beauty, soft, serene, and timeless. With her cool blue eyes and golden hair, she seemed born for the camera. But what set her apart was her refusal to lean solely on her looks. She was drawn to characters with layers, women who struggled, who loved too deeply, who bore quiet pain behind their smiles. Whether it was in The Detective, 1968, where she played a woman at the edge of moral breakdown, or in The Medusa Touch, 1978, where she investigated psychic rage, she brought intensity without ever overplaying. She wasn't loud, but she was unforgettable. As film roles grew less frequent in the 1970s and 1980s, Remick found a new home in television, and she brought the same sophistication and emotional intelligence to the small screen. Her performance as Jenny Churchill in Jenny, Lady Randolph Churchill, 1974, won her a Golden Globe and another Emmy nomination. She followed with celebrated turns in The Women's Room, The Letter, and Emma's War. She portrayed complex women, often wives, mothers, or professionals, in ways that highlighted their emotional depth and independence. She helped redefine what it meant to be a female lead on television. In an era when TV dramas were often male-centered, Lee carved out space for women's stories. Behind the camera, Lee Remick was known for her discretion. Though stunningly famous, she avoided Hollywood parties and scandal sheets. She married director Bill Colleran in 1957 and had 2 children, Kate and Matthew. The couple divorced in 1968, and in 1970 she married producer Kip Gowans, with whom she shared a gentle, private life that spanned 2 decades. There were rumors about the challenges of maintaining her beauty in a youth-obsessed industry, about her occasional battles with depression, and about secret longings she kept from public view. Some have speculated she may have quietly struggled with her identity in an unforgiving Hollywood landscape. But these remain only whispers, as Lee herself never gave the world anything but grace. Her mystery was part of her dignity. Never tried to be a star. She simply was. In 1989, Lee Remick received a diagnosis that would change the course of her final years: kidney cancer. It was the kind of news that might have driven some to retreat entirely, or others to share their pain with the world. But Lee was different. True to the quiet strength she had always carried, she chose not to make her illness a spectacle. There were no press conferences, no interviews, no public appeals. She did what she had always done. She faced it with grace and quiet courage. Even as her health declined, she continued to work. She showed up with the same quiet dignity, the same unwavering professionalism, the same gentle smile. There was no need for fanfare, no need for anyone to feel sorry for her. She didn't want to be seen as a woman fighting a losing battle. She wanted to be remembered as she had always been: an artist, a mother, a wife, and a woman who gave everything she had to her craft. She kept her suffering private, not out of pride, but out of a deep, unwavering belief in the sanctity of her personal life. The woman who had made a living bearing her soul on screen had always guarded her real self fiercely, and in the face of mortality, she chose peace over panic, stillness over spectacle. On July 2, 1991, Lee Remick passed away at her home in Los Angeles. She was only 55 years old. It was a loss that came far too soon, sharp, sudden, and profoundly heartbreaking. The world lost not just an actress of extraordinary depth, but a spirit defined by elegance, honesty, and restraint. For those who knew her work, the news felt like a quiet heartbreak, echoing across the years. And for those who knew her personally, it felt like the world had dimmed just a little. But in the way she chose to leave this world, without drama, without headlines, Lee reminded us, once more, of who she truly was. A woman who never needed applause to know her worth. A performer who didn't need to take a bow. Someone who understood that not all goodbyes have to be loud. Her final battle mirrored the way she lived, quietly, with strength and integrity. No grand declarations, no tragic scripts, just the closing of a chapter, soft and solemn. And yet, in that silence, her legacy grew louder. Her films are still watched, her performances still studied. Her eyes, captured forever on celluloid, still speak volumes. She may have exited life's stage quietly, but the imprint she left behind is anything but silent. Today, when we revisit old films, grainy, sepia-toned windows into the past, there's something quietly haunting about watching Lee Remick on screen. She doesn't explode off the screen with flash or flamboyance. No, her power was subtler, deeper. Her magic came not from spectacle, but from truth. Truth in the eyes, truth in the silence, truth in the smallest of gestures. She never demanded attention. She didn't have to. Her stillness was enough to quiet a room. Her presence was like a soft breeze, unannounced but unforgettable. Lee Remick's legacy is not defined by the number of awards on her mantle or by blockbuster records. It lives on in the way she made audiences feel. In the pause before a line, in the tremble of a smile, in the quiet heartbreak that settled behind her eyes. She didn't just act, she became. She brought emotional honesty to the screen in a way that still disarms viewers, even decades later. In a time when acting is often mistaken for volume, where every emotion is dialed up to 11, Remick's restraint feels revolutionary. She was the rare kind of actress who didn't need to tell us what her character was feeling. She allowed us to sense it, to sit with it, to live inside it. Whether she was playing a troubled wife, a grieving mother, or a woman on the brink, she trusted the audience enough to whisper where others would shout. Her performance in Days of Wine and Roses is still talked about, not just because of the storyline, but because of the soul she poured into it. Watching her unravel on screen didn't feel like watching an actress perform. It felt like witnessing a human being quietly fall apart. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and it was unforgettable. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Lee Remick was her humility. She never chased the spotlight, never needed to dominate the screen. Instead, she let her craft speak for her. She let the work do the talking, and in doing so, she created something that lasted far beyond her years. Today, younger actors still study her performances, not for technique, but for truth. She is remembered not as a Hollywood icon in the traditional sense, but as something rarer, a mirror to real life. She didn't portray characters, we believed she was them. Her legacy is not just in the roles she played, but in the quiet revolution she led, proof that silence, when used with care, can echo louder than any monologue. Lee Remick reminds us that greatness doesn't always come wrapped in glitter. Sometimes it comes in the form of a glance, a sigh, or a pause that lingers long after the credits roll. She didn't need to shine to be remembered. Her stillness, graceful, human, and honest, was a light all its own. And it still burns, softly, in the hearts of those who remember her. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Whether you stayed for a few seconds, watched all the way through, dropped a like, or left a kind comment, you made a difference, and I felt it. There are actors whose names fade with time, and then there are those like Jack Elam, a man whose face was so unforgettable, so oddly mesmerizing, that it became immortal. Jack wasn't handsome in the traditional Hollywood sense. His eye wandered, his features were rugged, his voice gritty. But when he appeared on screen, whether as a gunslinger, a drunken outlaw, or a comedic sidekick, you watched. You couldn't help it. He drew you in. More than just a character actor, Jack Elam was a cinematic force of nature. A man who took a childhood tragedy and turned it into a lifelong triumph. A man who redefined what it meant to be unforgettable. Jack Elam was born on November 13, 1920, in Miami, Arizona, a tough little mining town in the American Southwest. His early years were marked by hardship and tragedy. His mother died when he was still very young, and not long after, Jack suffered a freak accident at the age of 12. A pencil jabbed into his left eye, leaving him permanently blind in it. It's the kind of moment that could have crushed anyone's spirit. But Jack wasn't like most people. Instead of letting it defeat him, he wore it. He owned it. That misaligned eye, restless, unpredictable, became the very thing that set him apart in a world obsessed with perfection. But long before Hollywood ever noticed him, Jack was just a young man doing his best to survive. After high school, he studied accounting at Santa Monica Junior College, then worked as an auditor and bookkeeper, eventually managing finances for independent film producers and even a few gambling establishments. It was an unlikely path to stardom, but in Jack's life, the unexpected always seemed to be the most meaningful. Elam entered the movie business not through drama school or theater, but through the back door of accounting. He was working for a film producer when the opportunity to try acting came up. At first, it was small roles, barely a line here or there, but casting directors saw something in him. That face, that energy, that immediacy. His first credited role was in the 1949 film She Shoulda Said No, a low-budget anti-drug film. It wasn't exactly Oscar bait, but it was a start, and Jack knew how to make the most of it. In the 1950s, he began carving out a niche in westerns and noir thrillers. He wasn't the star, he wasn't even the second lead. But in every scene, he left a mark. A twitch, a look, a crooked smile. He had a way of making even the briefest moments feel like they mattered. To millions of moviegoers through the 1950s and 60s, Jack Elam wasn't just a character actor. He was the face of menace, mischief, and madness in the American West. With his wild eyes, craggy face, and unpredictable energy, Elam became one of the most enduring icons of the golden age of the Hollywood Western. He didn't play heroes, he didn't wear the white hat. Instead, he made his mark by leaning fully into the darkness, portraying outlaws, drunkards, killers, and loners who seemed as if they had wandered into the scene straight from a saloon brawl or a prison escape. His filmography reads like a blood-stained trail across the cinematic frontier. Gunfight at the OK Corral, 1957, The Far Country, 1954, The Man from Laramie, 1955, The Comancheros, 1961, Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Each of these films is now considered a Western classic, and in each one, Elam brought a touch of authentic chaos. He didn't just play villains, he humanized them. Beneath the snarls and sneers, there was a twitch of regret, a flicker of pain. His characters were the kind of men who had seen too much, drunk too much, and were long past the point of salvation. Elam's gift was subtle. He made even the most repellent characters feel like they had backstories you could almost imagine. They weren't evil for evil's sake. They were desperate, shaped by dusty roads, war, betrayal, or a life of unrelenting survival. When Jack Elam entered a scene, the audience felt a chill, not because he was loud or grotesque, but because he was real. Perhaps the most iconic moment of his career came in Sergio Leone's 1968 masterpiece, Once Upon a Time in the West. In the now legendary opening sequence, Elam appears alongside two other gunmen, waiting for a train to arrive in a desolate, wind-blown station. What unfolds over 10 nearly wordless minutes is a masterclass in atmosphere and tension. Flies buzz, wind creaks a door, water drips from a hat brim, and Jack, sitting still, does more with a twitch of his cheek and a narrowing of his eyes than most actors do with entire monologues. He never utters a single line in the scene. He doesn't need to. His presence speaks volumes, a life of cruelty, patience sharpened like a knife, and eyes always scanning for betrayal. That one sequence, more than any other, captured what Jack Elam meant to the genre. He was the outlaw spirit, mysterious, dangerous, possibly even sympathetic. He embodied the kind of man who could shoot you in the back or buy you a drink depending on what day it was. But Jack Elam was more than just a heavy. Later in his career, he flipped the script, often using his unique look and timing for comedy. He became a beloved figure in films like Support Your Local Sheriff, 1969, and The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again, 1979, where he parodied the very types of villains he used to play straight. It was a clever second act, and it proved he wasn't just a one-note performer, he was an actor with surprising range. Still, it's the outlaw roles that define him in the collective memory. That crooked glare, that lazy eye, a result of a childhood injury. That shifty demeanor that made you believe, really believe, that his characters had killed a man in cold blood and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Jack Elam didn't just act in westerns. He helped shape what we think a Western villain should look and feel like. He turned the idea of bad guy into something more layered, more lived in. He gave the American outlaw a face, his face, and in doing so, became part of the mythos of the West itself. By the time the late 1960s rolled around, audiences thought they had Jack Elam all figured out. He was the mad-eyed menace, the twitchy outlaw lurking behind the saloon doors, the hired gun you didn't turn your back on. But then, just when everyone expected him to pull the trigger, Jack Elam did something totally unexpected. He made them laugh. In what would become one of the most delightful reinventions in Hollywood character acting, Elam turned his legacy of villainy on its head. In films like Support Your Local Sheriff, 1969, and Support Your Local Gunfighter, 1971, he leaned into comedy with such charm and ease that it seemed like he'd been holding back a secret talent all along. Gone was the cold-blooded killer. In his place was a scruffy, wild-eyed sidekick, often bewildered, always funny, and completely lovable. These roles didn't erase his reputation as a Western heavy. Instead, they expanded it. He spoofed the very archetypes he once defined. The snarling henchman, the twitchy gunman, the half-crazed outlaw. But now, instead of fear, he drew belly laughs. He played characters who were equal parts dangerous and dim-witted, delivering lines with perfect timing and physical comedy that drew on years of dramatic intensity turned on its head. Audiences were enchanted. Directors took notice. And suddenly, the man who had once been typecast as the villain was in high demand for something entirely new, heartwarming comic relief. This newfound image carried Elam into a thriving television career. From the late 60s through the 80s, he became a familiar face in American living rooms, guest starring in an impressive array of beloved shows. Gunsmoke, Bonanza, The Twilight Zone, The Rifleman, Have Gun, Will Travel, The Virginian, Alias Smith and Jones, Fantasy Island, Wagon Train, The Dakotas, and many, many more. Each appearance brought something fresh. Whether he was playing a mischievous old prospector, a quirky townsman, or a fast-talking con artist, Elam injected every role with his unique blend of intensity and humor. His gift wasn't just in the way he delivered lines, it was in the way he inhabited his characters. A single raised eyebrow or a confused look from that famously wandering eye could steal an entire scene. But behind the laughs, there was something deeper going on. Jack Elam's late career comedy wasn't just a gimmick. It was a kind of redemption arc. After years of playing the bad guy, Elam was finally allowed to be the one audiences rooted for. Kids who might have once cowered at the sight of him in a black hat were now giggling at his pratfalls and quoting his one-liners. Adults admired the cleverness of his transformation, recognizing that it takes real skill and courage to shift gears so dramatically and successfully. That twinkle in his one good eye, the same one that once signaled danger, now sparkled with mischief and good humor. It became his signature in an entirely new way. Jack Elam didn't abandon his past. He built upon it. He used every ounce of grit and gravitas from his earlier villainous roles and twisted them just enough to show the absurdity behind the violence. In doing so, he crafted a third act that felt both surprising and inevitable. In the end, Elam proved that fearsome could be funny, that menacing could be endearing, and that legends don't have to fade away. They can evolve. And few did it with more charm, style, or squinting genius than Jack Elam. To moviegoers around the world, Jack Elam was the ultimate screen villain. A wild-eyed outlaw, a dangerous drifter, a man who could kill with a crooked smile. But away from the dusty sets and shadowy saloons of Hollywood westerns, Elam was a vastly different man. Quiet, thoughtful, and deeply human. Behind that famously fearsome face lived a gentle soul, a man who valued honesty over hype, family over fame. Off-camera, Jack Elam was soft-spoken and introspective, known for his dry sense of humor and sharp intelligence. He was never one to seek the spotlight outside of his work. Instead, he let his characters do the talking and kept his private life, well, private. Those who knew him personally spoke often about his loyalty and kindness. He was a devoted husband, married to his wife Margaret for over 40 years, and a loving father to his children. While his on-screen persona might have been menacing, his home life was built on gentleness and consistency. He rarely let the demands of Hollywood interfere with his responsibilities as a family man. Colleagues across decades of film and television described Elam with the kind of warmth reserved for a beloved uncle or lifelong friend. He was generous with his time, eager to share advice with young actors, and never let his long resume or growing fame inflate his ego. On set, he was professional and punctual. Off set, he was quick with a joke and a heartfelt story. He never needed to be the loudest voice in the room. His presence alone spoke volumes. In a 1994 interview, reflecting on his decades of playing outlaws and lunatics, Jack laughed and said, "I've played more drunks, psychotics, and murderers than you can count, but I never got arrested in real life." Go figure. That self-deprecating wit captured the essence of Elam perfectly. He understood the gap between who he was and who he played, and he had no interest in pretending the two were the same. He never bought into the myth of the dangerous actor. For Jack, acting was a job he loved, not a lifestyle he lived. And though he worked with some of the biggest stars of his era, from John Wayne to Henry Fonda, Jack never saw himself as a star. He always called himself a character man, someone whose job was to serve the story, bring texture to the frame, and disappear when the scene was done. But of course, Elam never truly disappeared. His unmistakable screen presence, that cocked head and wandering eye, that slow-burning menace and sudden flash of humor, those traits made him unforgettable. And knowing the contrast between his tough guy image and his real-life tenderness only adds to the magic of his legacy. Jack Elam was a man of contradictions. Terrifying on screen, tender off it. Fierce in fiction, faithful in fact. And it's that very contrast, the outlaw with a heart of gold, that makes his story so enduring. He didn't just leave behind a legacy of Western classics. He left behind a lesson in humility, grace, and the art of not taking yourself too seriously. In the end, that might be his greatest role of all. Jack Elam passed away on October 20th, 2003 from congestive heart failure. He died quietly at home in Ashland, Oregon, at the age of 82. Far from the dusty main streets and blazing guns of the Wild West he'd brought so vividly to life. There were no grand tributes, no sweeping montages at award shows, no parade of headlines, just a few quiet obituaries, and the gentle ache felt by generations of moviegoers who had grown up watching him squint his way across the silver screen. But for those who knew his work, for those who loved the American Western, his passing marked the end of an era. Because Jack Elam wasn't just another face in the crowd. He wasn't just that guy in the background. He was a scene stealer, a tone setter, a character actor who made everything around him more alive, more electric, more human. He didn't always get top billing. He didn't need it. Jack Elam was the kind of performer who elevated a film simply by showing up. With a twitch of his eye or the lilt of a gravelly voice, he could turn a simple line into a moment you remembered long after the credits rolled. His mere presence could turn tension into terror, or just as easily into laughter. And while his filmography spans decades and genres, it is in the Western where his legacy will forever ride. He was the West, the grit, the unpredictability, the complexity. He could play a killer, a clown, or a conflicted drifter, and he did it all without ever losing that spark of truth that made you believe this man had lived something real. In the end, Jack Elam didn't go out with a bang. He didn't need to. His life, like his characters, was more about substance than spectacle. He was a man who left his mark not with noise, but with nuance. Not with flash, but with deep, undeniable presence. Today, his name may not always lead the marquee, but to true lovers of cinema, especially those who cherish the dusty trails of the American Western, Jack Elam will always be one of the greats. A man who, without ever playing the hero, became unforgettable in his own right. The sun set quietly on Jack Elam's life, just as it rose quietly each time he stepped onto the screen. And somewhere out there, in the flickering light of a projector or the hum of a late-night TV rerun, he's still squinting under a wide-brimmed hat, still stealing scenes, still making us believe. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Whether you stayed for a few seconds, watched all the way through, dropped a like, or left a kind comment, you made a difference, and I felt it.